A 6-year-old girl clutches a stuffed animal in a California courtroom. She points across the room. "He throwed her into the car," she says, her voice barely above a whisper. "When she was in the car, she just looked at me. I think she said help or something." 3 years earlier, this child had witnessed her best friend's abduction in broad daylight. What she remembered would break a case wide open. What she didn't know was that the man who took her friend had already beaten the system once before. This is the story of Samantha Runnion, a case that would change child safety laws across America, a case built on the courage of a child witness, the determination of a grieving mother, and DNA evidence so rare it would be found in fewer than 1 person in a trillion. I'm Cold Case Desk, and this is a case that proves sometimes the system fails us twice before it finally delivers justice. Monday, July 15, 2002. Stanton, California. 6:30 in the evening. 5-year-old Samantha Bree Runnion sits on a low cinder block wall with her friend Sarah On, who's 6. They're playing in what residents later describe as a blind spot, a narrow road lined with garages at the Smoke-A-Tree condominium complex in Orange County. No parking spaces nearby, no windows overlooking them, no adults watching. This is the kind of place children aren't supposed to play. But it's summer, it's warm, and the 2 girls are focused on their game. Samantha's wearing a white blouse, red checkered shorts, and pink sandals printed with green frogs. Just 11 days from now, she'll turn 6 years old. Her mother, Erin, has already picked out most of her birthday presents. Lincoln logs, a dinosaur puzzle, a new dress for one of her Barbie dolls. Samantha won't live to see any of them. A light green 1994 Ford Thunderbird drives past the girls, slowly. Then it turns around, comes back, pulls up beside them. The driver is a 27-year-old man named Alejandro Avila. Hispanic male, slicked back black hair, thin mustache, brown eyes, powder blue button-down shirt. He leans out the window. "Have you seen a little puppy?" The girls look up. "A puppy?" He specifies. "A chihuahua." Samantha bends down. She uses her hand to gesture, asking how big the dog is. That's when Avila grabs her. Samantha screams, "Help me! Tell my grandma!" She kicks, she fights, she's dragging her feet, trying to resist, but she's 5 years old and weighs maybe 40 pounds. Avila throws her into the car, the door slams, tires screech. The green Thunderbird speeds away. Sarah On stands frozen for maybe 3 seconds. Then she runs to tell her mother, runs to get help. Within 15 minutes, Orange County Sheriff's deputies are on scene. Helicopters circle overhead, searchlights scanning the neighborhood, but Samantha is already gone. Her mother, Erin, 27, is at work in Long Beach, where she's an analyst for British Petroleum. She chose this complex specifically because it was safe, family-friendly, the kind of place where garage doors stayed open and neighbors socialized, the kind of place where children played outside without fear. Samantha's grandmother, Virginia, had been watching her. She was right around the corner, inside the apartment. She didn't see a thing. Now begins one of the most intensive manhunts in Southern California history. More than 2,000 tips pour in within hours. FBI agents flood into Orange County. The case captures national attention almost immediately, because this wasn't a stranger abduction in some remote area. This was broad daylight, rush hour, a residential complex, a 5-year-old girl dragged screaming into a car while her friend watched. Parents across Orange County suddenly realized their safe neighborhoods might not be safe at all. The police issue an immediate description of Samantha. White blouse, red checkered shorts, pink sandals with green frogs. 5 years old, brown hair, brown eyes. They also have something else, something crucial. Sarah On, despite being only 6 years old and having just witnessed something unimaginably terrifying, is able to give investigators a detailed description of the kidnapper and his vehicle. Hispanic male, she tells them. 25 to 40 years old, black hair slicked back, thin mustache, brown eyes, powder blue shirt. The car was light green, older model, 4 doors. Sketch artist Michael Street works with Sarah to create a composite drawing. Years later, he'll describe her as an amazing witness. The sketch is remarkably detailed. It will prove to be extraordinarily accurate. Within hours, that sketch is everywhere. Television, newspapers, flyers. Law enforcement officers across Southern California begin stopping hundreds of vehicles that even vaguely match the description Sarah provided. The community mobilizes, volunteers join search teams. People who've never met the Runnions are out looking. Everyone's holding on to hope, praying that somehow, somewhere, Samantha will be found alive. But investigators know the statistics. They know that in stranger abductions of children, the critical window is measured in hours, not days. Every minute that passes decreases the likelihood of a positive outcome. Samantha's father, Derek, is in Sunderland, Massachusetts. He and Erin had separated, but he remained extremely close to his daughter. He sent her letters and packages. She visited him regularly. "I loved her so much," he'll later say, his voice breaking. Now he's on the other side of the country, helpless, waiting for news. The first night passes. No Samantha. Tuesday, July 16th. The search continues. Helicopters, search dogs, volunteers combing through neighborhoods, police stopping every green car they see. Then, just after 3 o'clock in the afternoon, a call comes in to 911. 2 hang gliders have spotted something in a remote area near Lake Elsinore, close to the intersection of Killintrook Trail and Ortega Highway, about 50 miles south of Stanton. The caller identifies himself only as Justin. He's audibly traumatized, at times too shaken to speak clearly. "Oh my God, we found a dead body. Please hurry. I'm so scared. It's a little kid. It's a baby." The dispatcher tries to keep him calm. "Stay with me, sir. Help is on the way. I think it might be the little girl from the news." "I'm sorry," Justin says. "I have a 3-year-old son. Please hurry. I'm scared and I want to get out of here." The location is remote. Rugged terrain in the Cleveland National Forest in Riverside County. The kind of place you'd only find if you were specifically looking for it, or if you were hang gliding overhead. Sheriff's deputies and investigators rush to the scene. What they find confirms everyone's worst fears. It's Samantha. The 5-year-old is deceased. She's been sexually assaulted. She's suffered at least 2 blows to the head, causing her brain to swell. The pathologist will later determine that she died from mechanical asphyxiation through compression of the neck, with the blunt force trauma to the head contributing significantly. The medical examiner cannot determine exactly what caused the compression to the neck, but it was sustained and forceful enough to kill a 5-year-old child. There's something else deeply disturbing about the scene. Samantha's body has been posed in a graphic, sexually suggestive manner. It hasn't been buried or hidden. It's been left out in the open, positioned deliberately. FBI agent Richard Garcia will later explain what this signifies. The fact that it wasn't buried or hidden, the way it was left, almost like a calling card, a challenge. "I'm here, and I'm coming back again. That's why we believed this person would strike again." The pathologist estimates Samantha died sometime between 8 o'clock in the evening on July 15th and 2 o'clock in the morning on July 16th. Within hours of her abduction, perhaps as little as 90 minutes after she was taken. The remains are officially identified through photographs shown to Samantha's grandmother, Virginia. Erin is spared from having to view them directly. Now, the investigation shifts. This is no longer a kidnapping case. This is a murder investigation, and everyone involved knows they're hunting someone extremely dangerous. Sheriff Michael Corona holds a press conference. But instead of just addressing the media, he does something unusual. He speaks directly into the cameras, directing his words to the killer. "Don't sleep, don't eat, because we're coming after you. We will take every resource that's available to us to bring you to justice." His voice is steady, but those who know him can see he's struggling to contain his emotion. This case has affected him personally. It's affected everyone. But while Corona's warning is aimed at the suspect, it's the residents of Orange County who can't sleep. Fear has taken hold. Garage doors that were always open now stay shut. Communities that felt connected suddenly feel vulnerable. Parents are terrified. More than 500 FBI agents are now assisting local law enforcement. This is one of the largest manhunts in California history. Sheriff's officials make a point of noting that because Samantha's body was discovered so quickly, less than 24 hours after her abduction, they expect to recover significant forensic evidence, both from the scene itself and from her body. Evidence, they hope, that will lead them directly to her killer. And they're right. The killer has left behind what investigators will later describe as mountains of physical evidence. He's been, in their words, extremely sloppy. But first, they need to identify him. They need to put a name to the face in that sketch. The breakthrough comes from an unexpected source. A woman named Tammy recognizes the person in the composite drawing. She contacts police with a name, Alejandro Avila. The 27-year-old bears a striking resemblance to the sketch. He's 6'2", about 195 pounds, Hispanic male, black hair, mustache, brown eyes. Everything matches. But there's more. Much more. And what investigators are about to discover will reveal that this tragedy might have been prevented. Alejandro Avila has a history. 18 months earlier, he stood trial for molesting 2 young girls. The case went before a jury. He was acquitted. The jury in that case didn't believe the children. They believed Avila. And one of those girls, one of the children who testified against him, had lived at the Smoke Tree condominium complex, just 2 doors away from the Runnions. When police learn this information, a chilling theory begins to form. Was Avila familiar with the complex? Had he been there before? Was he looking for that girl when he found Samantha instead? His ex-girlfriend Lisbeth Veglon will later say exactly that. In my opinion, he was going there to look for my daughter. I believe he was obsessed with her. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. Right now, investigators are building their case. And what they're finding is going to be overwhelming. On July 19, 2002, 4 days after Samantha was abducted, Orange County Sheriff's deputies arrest Alejandro Avila at his mother's apartment in Lake Elsinore. He's been living with his sister Elvira in an apartment on Riverside Drive. His mother Adelina and another sister Adelita live in the same complex. This is only 10 miles away from where Samantha's body was found. Avila is taken into custody after a 12-hour interrogation and the execution of a search warrant. He's being held on suspicion of kidnapping and murder. The manhunt is over. But the investigation is just beginning. Detectives immediately begin retracing Avila's movements on July 15th. What they discover paints a damning picture. At 5:18 in the evening, Avila withdrew cash from a Bank of America ATM in Lake Elsinore. There's video footage and transaction records proving this. That evening, he was supposed to prepare dinner for his family. The meal was planned for between 6 and 6:30, but instead of staying home, he got in his car and drove. Cell phone records and surveillance footage track his route across Southern California over the next several hours. At 7:22, he stopped at a gas station in San Clemente. Security cameras captured him wearing what appeared to be athletic shoes. Later analysis will show these shoes match impressions found at the crime scene. Shortly after 9 o'clock, he checked into a Comfort Inn in Temecula. To verify his route and timeline, investigators do something methodical and brilliant. Exactly 1 week later, they retrace his movements themselves. Starting at the exact same minute he made his ATM withdrawal. They stop at every key point. The bank in Lake Elsinore, the Smoke Tree condominium complex in Stanton, the remote location where Samantha's body was found, both gas stations he visited, the hotel in Temecula. When they finish, they've driven approximately 202 miles. The total driving time, including stops, is 3 hours and 40 minutes. During their test drive, they reach the Smoke Tree complex at 6:17 in the evening, right around the time Samantha was abducted. The timeline fits perfectly, but it gets even more damning. Avila's sister Elvira later tells investigators that her brother was familiar with the area where Samantha's body was found. She even recalled visiting that same location with him once to watch a meteor shower. He knew exactly where he was going. The day after Samantha's abduction, July 16th, Avila told his sister he'd spent the previous day at the beach. During that conversation, she noticed a fresh scratch on the inside of his knee. He said he caught it on the leg of a baby gate at their apartment. But Elvira examined the gate. It was made of smooth plastic. No sharp edges, nothing that could have caused that kind of injury. It looked, she thought, like the kind of scratch you'd get from a child fighting back. Now investigators begin executing search warrants. Avila's apartment, his car, his mother's apartment. They're looking for evidence. And what they find is going to be overwhelming. The vehicle matches. The 1994 Ford Thunderbird is light green, consistent with Sarah On's description. The tires match tracks found at the scene where Samantha's body was discovered. But it's the DNA evidence that's going to seal Avila's fate. Inside his car, investigators find DNA consistent with Samantha's profile. On the door handles, on the passenger side seatbelt, on the center console. The DNA is likely from tears or mucus. The statistical probability of this DNA belonging to someone other than Samantha? 1 in 1 trillion. That's 1 in 1 million million. There aren't even 1 trillion people on Earth. But there's more. Underneath Samantha's fingernails, investigators recovered DNA matching Alejandro Avila's genetic profile. This suggests a physical struggle. Samantha fought back. The probability of this DNA belonging to someone other than Avila? 1 in 600 million. These aren't just strong matches. These are virtually impossible to explain away. This is the kind of evidence that removes any reasonable doubt. There are also shoe prints at the scene. Athletic shoes, size 12. When investigators search Avila's apartment, They find a Fila shoebox, size 12, but no shoes inside. Records from a local shoe store show that in September 2001, Avila purchased a pair of Fila Disruptor shoes, size 12. The surveillance footage from the gas station in San Clemente shows him wearing athletic shoes that matched this description. The shoes themselves are never found. Avila has disposed of them, but the circumstantial evidence is damning. Then, investigators examine Avila's computer. What they find is going to become some of the most disturbing evidence presented at trial. The computer contains images of children engaged in various sexual acts. The images had been deleted, but computer forensics specialists are able to recover them. On July 14, 2002, at 4:43 in the morning, the day before Samantha was abducted, someone used that computer to print a multi-page story. The story involved an adult male having sex with young children. Investigators also recover records of a chat room conversation. Someone using the screen name Girl*Lover had been chatting with someone in Finland. Both users discussed their attraction to girls under 12. The person in Finland asked what it was like living in California. Girl*Lover responded, "I live 4,000 feet in the mountains where you can do anything to little kids." The conversation also included a discussion about whether molesting a child was wrong. Both users agreed it was wrong if the child was related to you, but okay if the child was a stranger. The computer belonged to Avila's sister Adelita, but she testified she never accessed inappropriate material on it. Her mother didn't know how to use the internet. Avila had access to it regularly. This isn't just evidence of a crime. This is evidence of premeditation. This is evidence of someone who had been planning something like this. But here's what makes this case even more disturbing, even more tragic, even more infuriating. None of this should have happened. Because 18 months earlier, the system had a chance to stop Alejandro Avila, and it failed. If you're finding this documentary informative, please hit that like button and subscribe to Cold Case Desk for more in-depth true crime investigations. Your support helps us continue bringing you these important stories. Now we need to go back. Back to January 2001. To a courtroom in Riverside County. To a trial that would set in motion the tragedy we're discussing today. January 2001. Riverside County Superior Court. Alejandro Avila sits at the defense table, facing charges that could send him to prison for years. He's accused of molesting 2 young girls, both 9 years old. One is Catherine, the daughter of his ex-girlfriend Lisbeth Veglon. The other is Alexis, Catherine's cousin. The trial lasts 5 days. The jury, 8 men and 4 women, hears testimony from both children describing what Avila did to them. Catherine testifies that Avila touched her vagina with his hand more than 50 times. That he touched her with his penis more than 30 times. That this happened over the course of about a year, starting when she was 7 years old. She describes him using test tubes from his job, inserting them into her while telling her to practice so he could put his penis when I was older. She says he threatened her, told her that if she told anyone, he would harm her mother. Alexis provides similar testimony. Both girls describe a pattern of abuse that occurred when Avila was supposed to be watching them. The prosecutor presents his case. But there's a problem. A big problem. There's no physical evidence, no DNA, no medical evidence of abuse, nothing but the testimony of 2 9-year-old girls. And the defense attorney is skilled. He points out inconsistencies in the girls' statements, times when they've given different details, numbers that don't match from one interview to the next. The jury deliberates for a day and a half. Then they come back with their verdict, not guilty. Alejandro Avila walks out of that courtroom a free man. One of the jurors will later explain their reasoning. They weren't consistent on their story. The story was like, did he touch you 3 times? Yes. Did he touch you 5 times? Yes. Did he touch you 50 times? Yes. Everything was yes, yes, yes. The juror's logic is deeply flawed. Children who are being abused don't keep track of exact numbers. They don't maintain detailed records. They're traumatized. They're frightened. They're trying to survive. But the jury didn't see it that way. They saw inconsistencies. They saw reasonable doubt. They voted to acquit. Defense attorney John Potza will later admit he was surprised by the acquittal given the evidence that had been gathered, but he did his job. He defended his client. And his client was found not guilty. Prosecutor Paul Dickerson is devastated. I felt the guy was guilty and did everything I could to get him convicted, he'll later say. The case weighs on him heavily, but for Catherine and Alexis, the verdict is something far worse than disappointing. It's traumatizing. They told the truth. Adults didn't believe them, and the man who hurt them gets to walk free. Avila's mother, Adelina, is relieved. She's never believed the accusations. She thinks they were fabricated by Lisbeth Veglon as revenge for the relationship ending. "I don't think my son did anything," she says. She describes him as gentle with children, good with kids, never aggressive. But Catherine's mother, Lisbeth, doesn't see it that way. She knows what happened to her daughter. She knows the jury made a mistake, and she fears what might happen next. "I told the jurors they made a mistake," she'll later say. "And it's only a matter of time before he does it again." She has no idea how right she is, or how quickly it will happen. After his acquittal, Avila returns to his life. He moves in with his sister Elvira in Lake Elsinore. He has access to his sister Adelita's computer. He goes about his daily routine. But something has changed. The trial has taught him something. It's taught him that children can be dangerous witnesses, that their testimony can put him at risk. It's also taught him something else, something that will prove crucial at his eventual murder trial. One evening, Avila and his sister Elvira are watching television together. The movie Double Jeopardy is on. It's a thriller about a woman who's framed for her husband's murder, serves time, then discovers her husband is actually alive. The premise hinges on the constitutional principle of double jeopardy. You can't be tried twice for the same crime. During the movie, Avila turns to his sister. He says something chilling. "I could do anything I want to that little girl, and I can't be charged for it because of double jeopardy." Elvira remembers this conversation. She'll testify about it at Avila's murder trial. And it will help establish something crucial: motive. Because prosecutors will argue that Avila didn't just kill Samantha Runnion to satisfy his urges. He killed her to eliminate her as a witness. He had learned from his near miss in 2001. He wasn't going to let another child testify against him. But we're still in 2001, 18 months before Samantha's murder. And during those 18 months, something else happens. A third young girl comes forward. Her name is Kara. She's 11 years old, and she says that Avila abused her too. She describes an incident where he touched her inappropriately. She says he told her that if she said anything, someone could be killed. She was terrified. She stayed silent. Until Samantha's murder. When Kara sees Avila's face on the news, arrested for kidnapping and killing a 5-year-old, she finally tells her story. This testimony will be allowed at Avila's trial for Samantha's murder. Not to prove he killed Samantha, that will be established through other evidence, but to establish a pattern, to show the jury who Alejandro Avila really is. Because there's a pattern here. Multiple young girls, similar ages, similar descriptions of abuse, similar threats to keep them silent. And after his acquittal in 2001, Avila knows something important. As long as there are no witnesses who can testify, as long as there's no physical evidence, he can get away with it. So, on July 15, 2002, when he sees 2 little girls playing alone in a blind spot at the Smoke Tree condominium complex, he makes a decision. He's going hunting. Now let's return to the investigation, to the evidence that's piling up against Alejandro Avila. Because while his past is damning, it's the physical evidence from Samantha's case that's going to convict him. Sheriff Michael Corona holds another press conference on July 19th, the day of Avila's arrest. He's visibly emotional. This case has affected him deeply. It's affected his entire department. Looking directly into the cameras, he addresses Avila. "I told you we would hunt you down. If you thought for 1 minute we were kidding, tonight you know we were deadly serious." The community's reaction is complex. There's relief that someone has been arrested, but there's also anger, fury that this man had been tried before, that children had accused him before, that he'd walked free. Aaron Runnion will later say on Larry King Live, "I blame every juror who let him go, every juror who sat on that trial and believed this man over those little girls." She's not alone in that sentiment. Many people are asking how this could have happened, how a man accused of molesting children could be acquitted and then go on to murder a 5-year-old just 18 months later. But right now, in July 2002, the focus is on building a case so strong that this time there will be no acquittal. This time, justice will be served. On July 23rd, Avila is formally charged: first-degree murder, kidnapping, 2 counts of lewd and lascivious acts on a child under 14, with special circumstances, murder during kidnapping, and murder during the commission of lewd acts. Those special circumstances are crucial. They make Avila eligible for the death penalty. Meanwhile, the community is grieving. A memorial springs up outside the Smoke Tree condominium complex. Flowers, teddy bears, cards, personal tributes. People who never met Samantha leave tokens of their sorrow and their rage. An estimated 250 people gather for a vigil. They stand hand in hand, praying, grieving, comforting each other. Many are crying, some are angry, all are shattered by what's happened in their community. Erin Runnion addresses the crowd. Through her tears, she asks them to not only protect their own children, but to look out for all children, to be vigilant, to trust their instincts. Samantha's father, Derek, echoes her words. "Please watch your children," he says, his voice breaking. "Keep an eye on them. Don't let them out of your sight. I will think of her when I wake up every day. I will think of her when I go to bed. I will think of her all day long. I love you dearly. I miss you, Samantha." The pain in his voice is unbearable to hear. As the investigation continues, more details emerge about Avila's movements and behavior in the weeks leading up to the murder. A man comes forward. He says that Avila was once his roommate. When Avila moved out, the man found disturbing images on a computer in Avila's former bedroom. Images depicting child sexual abuse. Another witness describes Avila's relationship with his ex-girlfriend Lisbeth. He showed little interest in physical intimacy with her, the witness says. Sometimes he asked her to dress in what was described as junior-style clothing that would make her look younger. These details paint a picture of someone with a long-standing, persistent attraction to children, someone who has been acting on those urges for years. And crucially, someone who has been escalating. The abuse of Catherine started when she was 7 and continued for about a year. Non-contact abuse, progressing to contact abuse, progressing to more invasive acts. The abuse of Alexis followed a similar pattern. Kara's experience was a single incident, but it included threats of violence. And then Samantha. Abducted, sexually assaulted, murdered. This is a pattern of escalation, and it's a pattern that experts in criminal behavior recognize immediately. Avila wasn't going to stop. If he hadn't been caught, there would have been more victims. FBI agent Richard Garcia's assessment of how Samantha's body was left was correct. It was a challenge, a taunt. "I did this, and I'll do it again." But Avila made mistakes. He left DNA everywhere. He was captured on surveillance cameras. His cell phone records tracked his movements. His computer contained evidence of his intentions. For someone who had beaten the system once, he had become remarkably careless. Or perhaps he thought he was untouchable. Perhaps the acquittal in 2001 had given him a false sense of invincibility. Whatever the reason, his sloppiness is going to be his downfall. Now we need to talk about what happens when a child goes missing. About the systems that are supposed to protect them. About what existed in 2002 and what didn't. In 2002, California doesn't have an Amber Alert system. When Samantha is abducted, there's no way to instantly notify thousands of drivers on Southern California's freeways. No electronic billboards flashing her description. No alerts pushed to people's phones. The abduction happens during rush hour. Thousands of vehicles are on the roads. Any one of them might have seen the green Thunderbird. Any one of them might have been able to provide crucial information, but there's no way to reach them. No system in place to turn every driver into a potential witness. That's about to change. Governor Gray Davis is watching this case closely. He's horrified by what happened to Samantha, and he's aware that the Amber Alert system, named after Amber Hagerman, who was abducted and murdered in Texas in 1996, has been successfully implemented in other states. Within 2 weeks of Samantha's death, Governor Davis personally calls Erin Runnion. He tells her he's going to sign Amber Alert into law in California. On August 24, 2002, just 40 days after Samantha's murder, Governor Davis signs Assembly Bill No. 415. California becomes the 14th state to adopt the Amber Alert system. The bill mandates that when a child is abducted, alerts will be displayed on electronic freeway signs across the state. Radio and television stations will interrupt programming to broadcast the information. The alert will include a description of the child, the suspected abductor, and any vehicle involved. The case that drove this change? The case that proved the necessity of such a system? The abduction and murder of Samantha Runnion. She becomes the catalyst. Her story, her face, becomes the reason California finally acts, and the system proves itself almost immediately. Less than 2 weeks after implementation, 2 teenage girls from Quartz Hills are kidnapped and sexually assaulted. Drivers see the Amber Alert on freeway signs. They spot the suspect vehicle. They call police. Officers respond and rescue both girls during what's described as a gun battle. The girls are saved from what appeared to be imminent death. This is exactly what might have saved Samantha if the system had existed in July 2002. Thousands of drivers on Southern California freeways might have seen the green Thunderbird, might have called it in, might have given police crucial information in those first critical hours. But the system didn't exist, and Samantha died. Her legacy, though, is that hundreds of children since then have been saved. The California Amber Alert system has been activated hundreds of times. The success rate is remarkable. Children are found, abductors are caught, lives are saved, all because of Samantha. Aaron Runnion will later say, "She was the catalyst for the California Amber Alert. Hundreds and hundreds have been protected." It's a legacy. But it's a legacy that comes at the highest possible cost. Now it's time to prepare for trial. And for Aaron Runnion, this means something she never could have imagined doing. She has to learn about the man who killed her daughter. She has to understand him. She has to sit in a courtroom and listen to details of what he did. It's going to be 3 years before the trial begins. 3 years of waiting. 3 years of knowing that Avila is alive while her daughter is gone. 3 years of preparing for the moment when she'll have to face him in court. But during those 3 years, Erin doesn't just wait. She acts. She channels her grief into purpose. In September 2002, just months after Samantha's death, Erin founds the Joyful Child Foundation. It's a nonprofit organization focused on preventing crimes against children through education and empowerment. The name is deliberate, joyful, because that's what Samantha was, joyful, happy, full of life. The foundation's mission is to teach children how to recognize danger, how to trust their instincts, how to say no, how to get away if someone tries to hurt them. It's the kind of education that might have saved Samantha. It's the kind of education that might save other children. Erin throws herself into this work. She speaks at schools. She develops curricula. She trains teachers and law enforcement officers. She becomes an advocate, traveling to Sacramento, to Washington, D.C., anywhere she needs to go to push for stronger laws protecting children. She's turning her pain into protection for other children. She's making sure Samantha's death means something, but she's also preparing for trial. Because justice for Samantha requires that Alejandro Avila be convicted. And not just convicted, but sentenced appropriately for what he did. The prosecution is building what they believe is an overwhelming case. DNA evidence that's virtually irrefutable. Computer evidence showing premeditation. Testimony from multiple victims establishing a pattern. Surveillance footage and cell phone records establishing timeline and opportunity. But they know that juries can be unpredictable. They know that in 2001, a jury looked at evidence of child molestation and voted to acquit. They're not taking any chances this time. The decision is made to seek the death penalty. District Attorney Tony Rackauckas announces this publicly. Looking straight into the cameras, he makes a promise. "I do want to make one thing very clear. Anyone who commits an act like this in Orange County will either die in prison of natural causes or be executed." It's a strong statement, and it reflects the community's anger and desire for justice. But before there can be a trial, there has to be a funeral. The community has to say goodbye to Samantha. July 24, 2002, Crystal Cathedral in Garden Grove. Between 3,000 and 5,500 mourners pack into the cathedral. The service is held just 2 days after what would have been Samantha's 6th birthday. Instead of celebrating with Lincoln logs and dinosaur puzzles, her family is preparing to bury her. Reverend Robert A. Schuller officiates. Samantha's artwork is displayed throughout the cathedral. Music from Peter Pan plays. The program features one of Samantha's drawings with the words, "Be brave." Those 2 words will become central to Erin's advocacy work. Be brave. It's what she tells children. It's what she named one of the foundation's key programs. It's Samantha's message to the world. A small brown coffin covered with pink roses holds Samantha's remains. Later, she'll be cremated. Erin addresses the mourners. She's composed, but you can hear the pain in every word. "Nothing can bring our baby back," she says, her voice breaking. But knowing that her death was handled with the utmost integrity and her life was cherished by so many does bring some solace. We are overwhelmed by the love people have shown Samantha. We always knew she had a gift for the world, but it never occurred to us that her greatness would be realized in her death. It's a statement that reveals both grief and grace. Erin is already thinking about legacy, about how Samantha's story can help others, about how something good can come from something so terrible. Derek speaks as well. He's barely able to get words out. The pain of losing his daughter, of being on the other side of the country when it happened, of not being there to protect her, it's overwhelming. The service is heart-wrenching. Reporters covering it struggle to maintain composure. Mourners openly weep. This is a community trying to process something that makes no sense. The murder of a 5-year-old child. In broad daylight. In a place that was supposed to be safe. After the service, the memorial outside the Smoke Tree complex continues to grow. People keep adding flowers, teddy bears, messages. The site becomes a place of pilgrimage for those who need to express their grief and solidarity. But even as the community mourns, the investigation continues. Because the trial is coming, and when it does, the world is going to see exactly what kind of evidence has been gathered against Alejandro Avila. March 14, 2005, Orange County Superior Court. Nearly 3 years after Samantha Runnion's murder, jury selection begins for the trial of Alejandro Avila. The case has been assigned to Judge William R. Froberg. The lead prosecutor is Deputy District Attorney David Brent. The primary defense attorney is Philip L. Zalewski. Before the trial even begins, there's a critical pre-trial ruling that's going to shape everything that follows. The prosecution wants to introduce evidence of Avila's 2001 acquittal. They want the jury to hear testimony from Catherine, from Alexis, and from Kara, the third girl who came forward after Samantha's murder. The defense objects strenuously. They argue that bringing up an acquittal is prejudicial, that it violates the principle of double jeopardy, that it's going to unfairly bias the jury against Avila. But the prosecution has a powerful legal argument. California Evidence Code Section 1108 permits evidence of prior sexual offenses in prosecutions involving sexual offenses. The rationale is that such evidence shows propensity, pattern, and motive. Judge Froberg rules in favor of the prosecution. He finds that the probative value of this evidence is extremely high. The jury will hear about the 2001 case. They'll hear testimony from all 3 girls. This is a devastating blow to the defense. Because it means the jury won't just be deciding whether Avila killed Samantha, they'll also be learning that he was previously accused of molesting children. That there's a pattern. That this isn't an isolated incident. The trial begins in earnest after jury selection is complete. 8 men and 4 women will decide Avila's fate. The prosecution's opening statement is powerful and direct. David Brent lays out the evidence methodically. The DNA, the timeline, the computer evidence, the witnesses, the prior accusations. He paints a picture of a man who has been abusing children for years, who escalated from molestation to murder, who killed Samantha specifically to eliminate her as a witness. This defendant went hunting on July 15, 2002, Brent tells the jury. He was looking for a victim. He found Samantha Runnion. And he killed her to make sure she could never testify against him the way Catherine had. The defense's opening statement takes a different approach. Philip Zalewski argues that the DNA evidence was improperly collected and possibly contaminated. He points to what he calls inconsistencies in witness statements. He suggests that investigators zeroed in on Avila too quickly and ignored other possibilities. But it's a tough sell, because the evidence against Avila is overwhelming. The prosecution begins calling witnesses, and the testimony is going to be detailed, disturbing, and devastating. First, they establish the timeline of the abduction. Neighbors testify about seeing Samantha and Sarah playing, about hearing screams, about the green car speeding away. Then comes Sarah on. She's 9 years old now. Nearly 3 years have passed since she watched her best friend being dragged into a car. She walks into the courtroom, clutching a stuffed animal. The courtroom goes silent as she takes the stand. Everyone knows how crucial her testimony is. This is the child who provided the description that led police to Avila. This is the child who's been carrying this trauma for 3 years. She's asked to describe what happened on July 15, 2002. In a quiet voice, she tells the jury about playing with Samantha, about the man in the green car asking about a puppy, about what happened next. He throwed her into the car, Sarah says. Her voice is barely above a whisper, but in the silent courtroom, every word is clear. When she was in the car, she just looked at me. I think she said help or something. There are audible gasps in the courtroom. Some jurors are visibly emotional. Even the judge appears affected. The prosecutor asks Sarah to look around the courtroom. Can she see the man who took Samantha? Sarah looks directly at Alejandro Avila. She points. That's him. The defense cross-examines, trying to poke holes in her testimony. They point out that she initially said the kidnapper wasn't wearing glasses. Avila wears glasses. They note that she mentioned an H on the car's wheels that wasn't found on Avila's Thunderbird. But these are minor discrepancies. Sarah was 6 years old when she witnessed a traumatic event. That she remembers as much as she does is remarkable. That she's able to testify at all shows extraordinary courage. The prosecution's next focus is the forensic evidence. And this is where the case against Avila becomes absolutely damning. A DNA expert takes the stand. She explains in detail how DNA evidence works, how samples are collected, how they're analyzed, how probability calculations are made. Then she presents the findings. Samantha's DNA was found in multiple locations inside Avila's car. On the door handles, on the passenger side seatbelt, on the center console. The DNA likely came from tears or mucus. The probability that this DNA belongs to someone other than Samantha Runnion? 1 in 1 trillion. Let that sink in. 1 trillion. That's 1 million million. That's a number so large it's almost incomprehensible. There are approximately 8 billion people on Earth. If you tested the DNA of every single person alive, you'd need to test everyone on Earth more than 100 times before you'd statistically expect to find a match. This isn't just strong evidence. This is virtually conclusive evidence. There is no reasonable way to explain Samantha's DNA being in Avila's car other than that she was in that car. But there's more. Under Samantha's fingernails, investigators recovered DNA matching Alejandro Avila's genetic profile. The probability of this DNA belonging to someone other than Avila? 1 in 600 million. Again, this is a staggering number. This DNA got under Samantha's fingernails during a struggle. She fought back, she scratched him, and that evidence sealed his fate. The defense tries to challenge the DNA evidence. They suggest possible contamination. They question the collection procedures. They bring in their own expert, who raises theoretical concerns about how the samples were handled. But it's not enough. The DNA evidence is rock solid. Multiple samples, independent verification, probability calculations that eliminate any reasonable doubt. The prosecution then presents the timeline evidence. Bank records showing the ATM withdrawal, cell phone records tracking Avila's movements, surveillance footage from the gas station. They present the test drive that investigators conducted exactly 1 week after the murder. The route, the timing, everything matches. The tire tracks found near Samantha's body match Avila's car. The shoe prints at the scene match shoes Avila purchased but can no longer produce. Each piece of evidence, taken alone, might be circumstantial, but together, they form an overwhelming picture of guilt. Then comes the computer evidence. And this is where the trial takes an even darker turn. The forensic computer analyst testifies about what he found on the computer Avila had access to. The deleted images of children in sexual situations. The chat room conversations. The story printed at 4:43 in the morning on July 14th, just hours before Samantha's abduction. The prosecutor reads portions of the chat log to the jury. The screen name, Girl*Lover. The discussion about living 4,000 feet in the mountains where you can do anything to little kids. Some jurors look physically ill. This isn't just evidence of a crime. This is evidence of premeditation. This is evidence of someone who had been planning to hurt a child. The prosecution's theory is clear. Avila didn't just happen to see Samantha playing. He went out looking for a victim. He was hunting. Now it's time for the testimony about the 2001 case. And this is where the jury is going to learn who Alejandro Avila really is. Catherine takes the stand first. She's 12 years old now. She testifies about what Avila did to her when she was 7 and 8 years old. The abuse that occurred over the course of a year. The threats he made. The fear she lived with. She describes the test tubes. The escalating nature of the abuse. His words about practicing for when she was older. Her testimony is detailed and heartbreaking. The courtroom is silent except for her voice. Some jurors are crying. Then comes Alexis. She provides similar testimony about her own abuse, about the pattern of behavior, about how scared she was, and finally, Cara. She describes her experience with Avila, the inappropriate touching, the threat that someone could be killed if she told. The defense tries to challenge these testimonies. They point out that the 2001 jury acquitted Avila. They suggest these girls might be lying or confused. But the prosecution has an answer for that. They remind the jury that the 2001 case had no physical evidence. It was the girl's word against Avila's. And juries sometimes make mistakes. This case is different. This case has overwhelming physical evidence. DNA that proves beyond any doubt that Samantha was in Avila's car. That he touched her, that she fought back. The testimony from Catherine, Alexis, and Cara isn't being presented to prove Avila killed Samantha. The physical evidence already proves that. It's being presented to show pattern, to show motive, to show who this man really is. The prosecution calls more witnesses. Avila's ex-girlfriend Lisbeth testifies about his behavior, about his lack of interest in physical intimacy with her, about him asking her to dress younger. The former roommate testifies about finding disturbing imagery in Avila's bedroom after he moved out. Avila's sister Elvira takes the stand. She testifies about the conversation they had while watching Double Jeopardy. About Avila saying he could do anything to that little girl because of Double Jeopardy. This testimony is crucial because it establishes motive. Avila killed Samantha to eliminate her as a witness. He had learned from his 2001 acquittal that child witnesses were dangerous. He wasn't going to leave a witness alive again. The medical examiner testifies about Samantha's injuries, about the cause of death, mechanical asphyxiation through compression of the neck, with blunt force trauma contributing, about the sexual assault. The hang glider who found her body testifies. His voice still shakes as he describes what he saw. The 911 call is played for the jury. You can hear his terror and anguish. FBI agent Richard Garcia testifies about the crime scene, about how Samantha's body was positioned, about what that suggested. This wasn't someone trying to hide what they did. This was someone sending a message. The way the body was left, Garcia tells the jury, it was almost like a calling card, a challenge. I'm here, and I'm coming back again. We believed this person would strike again, if not caught. Finally, the prosecution rests. They've presented an overwhelming case. DNA evidence, timeline evidence, pattern evidence, motive, means, opportunity. Now it's the defense's turn. Philip Zalewski faces an almost impossible task. How do you defend against DNA evidence with a probability of 1 in 1 trillion? How do you explain away all the other evidence? The defense strategy focuses on challenging the evidence collection procedures. They call experts who raise theoretical concerns about contamination. They emphasize the discrepancies in Sarah Ann's description, the glasses she didn't mention, the H on the wheels she thought she saw. They present character witnesses who testify that Avila was gentle with children, that he wouldn't hurt anyone. His mother Adelina takes the stand. She's crying. She insists her son is innocent, that the accusations from 2001 were fabricated, that he's being targeted because of that case. She testifies about seeing the scratches on his legs, the ones Elvira thought looked like defensive wounds. Adelina insists they came from a baby gate in the apartment, but when the prosecutor cross-examines her, he asks her to describe the gate. She confirms it's made of smooth plastic. He asks how smooth plastic could cause those kinds of scratches. She doesn't have a good answer. The defense also tries to present an alibi. Avila's family testifies that he was supposed to be making dinner for them on July 15th, that they were expecting him home, but the prosecution's timeline evidence has already shown that Avila wasn't home. The ATM withdrawal, the cell phone records, the surveillance footage. He was driving across Southern California during the exact time Samantha was abducted. The defense doesn't call Avila to testify. This is standard practice when the defendant faces overwhelming evidence. Anything he says can only make things worse. After both sides rest, it's time for closing arguments. David Brent's closing is methodical and powerful. He walks the jury through every piece of evidence. He shows them how it all connects, how there's no reasonable explanation other than Avila's guilt. The defendant went hunting on July 15, 2002. Brent repeats. He found Samantha Runnion. He abducted her. He sexually assaulted her, and he killed her to eliminate her as a witness. The evidence proves this beyond any reasonable doubt. Philip Zalewski's closing focuses on doubt. He asks the jury to question the DNA evidence, to consider the possibility of errors, to remember that Avila was acquitted in 2001. But it's a weak argument, and everyone in the courtroom knows it. The jury retires to deliberate. It's April 27, 2005. Nearly 3 years after Samantha's murder. Nearly 2 months into the trial. The jury deliberates for less than 9 hours. Remarkably quick for a death penalty case. On April 28th, they return with their verdict. The courtroom is packed. Erin Runnion is there with her family. The media is there. The community that has followed this case so closely is represented. The court clerk stands to read the verdicts. Count 1. Kidnapping. Guilty. Count 2. First-degree murder. Guilty. Count 3. Lewd and lascivious act on a child under 14. Guilty. Count 4. Lewd and lascivious act on a child under 14. Guilty. Special circumstance. Murder during kidnapping. True. Special circumstance. Murder during lewd acts. True. As the clerk reads each verdict, Erin gasps. Then she breaks down in tears. These aren't tears of joy, how could they be? Her daughter is still gone. But they're tears of relief. Finally, justice. Across the jury box, 2 jurors are also weeping. One is rocking slightly in her chair. This case has affected everyone who's been part of it. At the defense table, Avila sits hunched between his attorneys. He's staring downward. He shows no visible emotion. His public defender has tears in her eyes. The conviction phase is over, but this is a capital case. Now comes the penalty phase. The jury must decide. Does Alejandro Avila receive life in prison without the possibility of parole, or does he receive the death penalty? If you've made it this far, please consider liking this video and subscribing to Cold Case Desk. We're committed to bringing you thoroughly researched, comprehensive documentaries on cases that matter. Your support helps us continue this work. The penalty phase begins immediately, and this is where the jury will hear about Avila's background, about what made him into the person who could commit such a crime. The defense calls witnesses to testify about Avila's childhood, and what they describe is genuinely horrific. Avila's father, Rafael, was abusive. In 1989, when Alejandro was 14, his father was arrested for child abuse. The children were removed from the home. Later, Rafael was convicted of fatally shooting a neighbor. He pleaded guilty to manslaughter and served time in prison. Avila's brother Juan was murdered in Mexico, shot in the back of the neck by gang members. Defense witnesses testify that Alejandro was beaten regularly as a child, that he may have been sexually abused by an uncle when he was 4 or 5 years old, that he grew up in poverty, in dysfunction, in violence. Dr. Francisco Gomez, a psychiatrist, testifies about multi-generational family trauma, about how abuse creates abusers, about how Alejandro Avila never had a chance to be anything other than what he became. It's compelling testimony. It's genuinely tragic, and it's designed to save Avila's life. The defense argues that while Avila's crime was terrible, it wasn't premeditated in the traditional sense. It was impulsive, shaped by a deeply damaged psyche. They argue that life in prison without parole is sufficient punishment, but the prosecution has a powerful rebuttal. They call Dr. Park Dietz, one of the nation's leading forensic psychiatrists. Dr. Dietz has evaluated some of the most notorious criminals in American history. Dr. Dietz testifies that yes, Avila appears to be a pedophile. Yes, he likely suffered trauma in childhood. But that doesn't remove his moral agency. That doesn't mean he couldn't choose differently. Pedophiles have free will, Dr. Dietz tells the jury. They can choose not to act on their desires. Many do. They recognize that acting on those desires would harm children, and they refuse to do it. Mr. Avila made different choices. Prosecutor David Brent argues that Avila's crime is just as bad a crime as any human can commit. He reminds the jury of the evidence, of the premeditation shown by the computer activity, of the deliberate nature of the abduction, of what Samantha suffered. He reminds them of the message sent by how her body was left. This person would strike again if given the chance, Brent says. The only way to ensure he never harms another child is to impose the ultimate penalty. The jury retires to deliberate on the sentence. They deliberate for 7 hours. On May 16, 2005, they return with their recommendation: death. The recommendation is unanimous. All 12 jurors believe Alejandro Avila should be executed for what he did to Samantha Runnion. Jury foreman Terry Dancy will later speak to reporters. If ever there was a crime that deserves the death penalty, it was this one, he says. His voice is firm. He shows no doubt about the decision. Now the case moves to sentencing. Judge William R. Froberg will make the final decision on whether to accept the jury's recommendation. That hearing takes place on July 22, 2005, exactly 3 years and 1 week after Samantha's murder. Before the judge imposes sentence, Erin Runnion is given the opportunity to make a victim impact statement, to address the man who killed her daughter. She stands. She looks directly at Alejandro Avila, and she speaks. Samantha fought, Erin says. Her voice is steady but filled with emotion. I know she fought. I know she looked at you with those amazing brown eyes and you still wanted to kill her. I don't understand it. I never will. She talks about what Samantha meant to her family, about the hole left by her absence, about the birthdays that will never happen, the milestones that will never be reached, the grandchildren that will never exist. The fact of the matter is that one's down, but my baby's still gone, Erin says. And there are still going to be children victimized if we don't do something to stop it. Even in this moment of personal grief, Erin is thinking about other children, about prevention, about legacy. Then Judge Froberg speaks. He's reviewing the evidence, the aggravating factors, the mitigating factors, the jury's recommendation. For the temporary gratification of his lust, the judge says, the defendant destroyed an entire family's future. He has forfeited his right to live. Judge Froberg accepts the jury's recommendation. He sentences Alejandro Avila to death. The judge goes further. He states that the evidence showed Avila was fueled by child pornography and that he went hunting on July 15, 2002. He addresses the defense's arguments about Avila's traumatic childhood. I view that testimony with a great deal of skepticism, the judge says, noting that none of these supposed childhood traumas were ever mentioned before this trial. Avila declines to speak. He shows no emotion. He's led out of the courtroom to begin his journey to death row. 9 of the 12 jurors return to the courtroom for the sentencing. They want to be there for Samantha's family. They want to see this through to the end. Outside the courthouse, Sheriff Michael Corona speaks to the media. He's standing beside Aaron Runnion. He's struggling to hold back emotion. "I want to thank Mrs. Runnion," he says, his voice cracking, "for not holding it against us, for not bringing your daughter home alive, for believing in us and becoming part of our family." It's a remarkable moment. This tough law enforcement officer, overcome with emotion, thanking a mother for her grace in the face of unimaginable loss. Aaron speaks as well. "I blame every juror who let him go," she says, referring to the 2001 acquittal. "Every juror who sat on that trial and believed this man over those little girls." Lisbeth Veglon, Catherine's mother, is also there. "Justice can finally be served not only for my daughter and my niece, but for Samantha," she says. She remains convinced that Avila was looking for Catherine that day and found Samantha instead. The conviction and death sentence bring a sense of closure to the legal proceedings. But for the families, there's no real closure. Samantha is still gone. Catherine, Alexis, and Kara still carry the trauma of what Avila did to them. But there is justice. Finally, there is justice. July 22, 2005. Alejandro Avila is sentenced to death. He's transported to San Quentin State Prison in Marin County, California, to await execution on death row. But in America, a death sentence doesn't mean immediate execution. It means years, sometimes decades, of appeals. And Alejandro Avila immediately begins the appeals process. His attorneys file a direct appeal to the California Supreme Court. This is mandatory in all California death penalty cases. The Supreme Court must review the case before any execution can take place. The appeal raises multiple arguments. Avila's attorneys argue that the trial should have been moved out of Orange County due to extensive pretrial publicity. They claim the media coverage was so pervasive that it was impossible for Avila to receive a fair trial. The judge erred in allowing testimony about the 2001 acquittal. They argue this violated double jeopardy and unfairly prejudiced the jury. The DNA evidence was improperly collected and should have been excluded. Various other technical legal issues regarding jury instructions, admission of evidence, and trial procedures. The case number is S135855, People v. Avila. And it's going to take 9 years for the California Supreme Court to issue its ruling. During these 9 years, Avila sits on death row. He's housed in a cell roughly 4 feet by 9 feet. He's allowed out for exercise a few hours per week. He has limited contact with other inmates. This is his life now. Meanwhile, Aaron Runnion is building something extraordinary. The Joyful Child Foundation, founded in September 2002, is growing. It's developing programs. It's reaching children across California and beyond. The foundation's flagship program is called Be Brave, Be Safe. It's a comprehensive curriculum designed for children from pre-kindergarten through high school. The program teaches children how to recognize dangerous situations, how to trust their instincts, how to say no, and, if necessary, how to physically resist and escape. The program is based on research into how predators select and approach victims. It's designed to give children the tools they need to protect themselves. Erin partners with law enforcement agencies, schools, and community organizations. She trains teachers and officers to deliver the curriculum. The program spreads throughout California and eventually to other states. She also develops parent education programs, because protecting children isn't just about teaching the children themselves. It's about educating parents about risks, about warning signs, about how to talk to their children about safety without terrifying them. Erin becomes a sought-after speaker. She travels to Sacramento regularly to advocate for stronger child protection laws. She testifies before legislative committees. She meets with lawmakers. And she's successful. Over the following years, numerous pieces of legislation pass in California that strengthen protections for children. Laws regarding sex offender registration, laws regarding DNA collection, laws regarding child safety education in schools. Erin has a hand in almost all of them. Her advocacy work is tireless. She also connects with other victims' families, other mothers who have lost children, other advocates working in this space. One particularly important connection is with J.N. Sepich. J.N.'s daughter Katie was a 22-year-old college student in New Mexico. In August 2003, Katie was raped and murdered. Her body was found in a landfill. The investigation went nowhere. There was DNA evidence from the crime scene, but no match in the database. 3 years later, in 2006, a man was arrested on an unrelated burglary charge. His DNA was collected after his conviction. It matched the DNA from Katie's murder. But here's the devastating part. That man had been arrested multiple times in the 3 years between Katie's murder and his eventual conviction for burglary. If DNA had been collected at arrest rather than after conviction, Katie's murder might have been solved 3 years earlier. J.N. Sepich became an advocate for what became known as Katie's Law. Legislation requiring DNA collection from individuals arrested for serious felonies, not just after conviction. The logic is straightforward. Many criminals commit multiple offenses before they're finally convicted of anything. If you collect DNA at arrest, you can solve cold cases faster. You can prevent future crimes by identifying violent offenders earlier. But it's controversial. Civil liberties advocates argue it violates presumption of innocence, that you shouldn't be treated as a criminal just because you've been arrested. The debate is intense, but J.N. persists, and Erin Runnion becomes one of her key allies. "I derived inspiration from her safety crusade," Erin will later say about J.N. The two mothers, united by tragedy, work together to push for stronger laws. Katie's Law eventually passes in New Mexico, then in other states. Eventually, more than 25 states adopt some version of Katie's Law. In 2006, Erin attends a White House ceremony. President George W. Bush is signing the Adam Walsh Child Protection and Safety Act into law. The act is comprehensive legislation designed to protect children from sexual exploitation and violent crime. It's named after Adam Walsh, the 6-year-old son of John Walsh who was abducted and murdered in 1981. Adam's case led to the creation of the television show America's Most Wanted. The Adam Walsh Act includes numerous provisions. It strengthens sex offender registration requirements. It creates a national sex offender registry. It increases penalties for crimes against children. And in Section 102, Paragraph 17, it specifically names Samantha Runnion. Erin stands in the White House alongside John Walsh, Mark Klaas, who lost his daughter Polly, Mark Lunsford, who lost his daughter Jessica, Patty Wetterling, whose son Jacob was abducted, Ed Smart, whose daughter Elizabeth was abducted but recovered, and other victim advocates. It's a moment of recognition. These families, who have suffered unimaginable losses, are being honored for turning their pain into purpose, for working to protect other children. Samantha's legacy is now enshrined in federal law. Her name will be remembered not just as a victim, but as a catalyst for change. The Amber Alert system that California adopted because of Samantha's case continues to prove its worth. Between 2002 and 2012, California issues 47 Amber Alerts under the expanded system Sheriff Corona championed. All 47 result in children being safely returned home. That's 47 children who might have died if not for the system put in place because of Samantha. She was the catalyst for the California Amber Alert, Erin says. Hundreds and hundreds have been protected. But while Erin is building this legacy, Alejandro Avila sits on death row, filing appeals. On June 30th, 2014, 9 years after Avila's conviction, the California Supreme Court finally issues its ruling. The opinion is written by Justice Ming Chin. It's unanimous. All 7 justices agree. The court rejects every single one of Avila's arguments. On the issue of venue change, the court finds that while there was extensive media coverage, the jury selection process was thorough. Jurors were questioned extensively about their exposure to media coverage and their ability to be impartial. The jurors who were selected convinced the judge they could be fair. There's no evidence they were biased. On the issue of admitting evidence about the 2001 case, the court finds that under California Evidence Code Section 1108, this evidence was properly admitted. Its probative value was high. It showed pattern, propensity, and motive. It was not unfairly prejudicial. On the DNA evidence, the court finds no problems with collection or analysis. The evidence was properly admitted. The court also reviews the death penalty itself. Was it appropriate given the facts of this case? The court finds it was. The murder was committed during a kidnapping. It was committed during sexual assault of a child. These are valid special circumstances under California law. The California Supreme Court affirms both the conviction and the death sentence. Case number S1358855, People v. Avila, 59 Cal.496. Avila's attorneys immediately file a petition for rehearing. It's denied. They then petition the United States Supreme Court for a writ of certiorari. They're asking the nation's highest court to review the case. In 2015, the U.S. Supreme Court denies certiorari. They decline to hear the case. The California Supreme Court's ruling stands. Avila's direct appeals are exhausted. His conviction and death sentence are final. But he's not out of options. He can still file what's called a state habeas corpus petition. This is a separate legal proceeding where he can raise claims that weren't addressed in the direct appeal. Claims about ineffective assistance of counsel. Claims about newly discovered evidence. Claims about constitutional violations. On February 19, 2015, such a petition is filed. But as of December 2025, no ruling has been issued. The petition appears to be languishing in the system. This is typical for California death penalty cases. The process takes decades. The appeals drag on. Inmates sit on death row for 20, 30, sometimes 40 years before execution, if execution ever happens at all. Which brings us to a critical development, one that means Alejandro Avila is almost certainly never going to be executed. March 13, 2019. California Governor Gavin Newsom issues Executive Order N-09-19. The order declares a moratorium on all executions in California. Every condemned inmate in California receives a reprieve. As long as the moratorium is in effect, no executions will be carried out. Governor Newsom's order is controversial. Supporters argue that the death penalty is expensive, ineffective, and morally wrong, that too many innocent people have been executed, that the system is racially biased. Opponents argue that some crimes deserve the ultimate punishment, that victims' families deserve to see justice carried out, that the people of California have repeatedly voted to retain the death penalty. But regardless of the debate, the practical effect is clear. Alejandro Avila is not going to be executed anytime soon. California hasn't executed anyone since January 17, 2006. That was Clarence Ray Allen, who died by lethal injection. He was 76 years old and had been on death row for more than 20 years. Since then, various legal challenges and procedural issues have prevented any executions. And now, the moratorium makes it official policy. As of December 2025, California's death row population has fallen to approximately 580 inmates. That's below 600 for the first time in 25 years. The decline is due to several factors. Some death row inmates have died of natural causes. Some have committed suicide. Some have had their sentences reduced through successful appeals or resentencing hearings. And fewer new death sentences are being imposed. In May 2024, another major change occurs. California completes the relocation of all death row inmates from San Quentin State Prison. For decades, San Quentin housed California's death row and execution chamber, but the state decides to rebrand San Quentin as the San Quentin Rehabilitation Center. The focus is shifting from punishment to rehabilitation. All 512 condemned inmates are transferred to other facilities across California. Alejandro Avila, now 50 years old, is among them. His current specific facility is not publicly disclosed. This means Avila is no longer on death row in the traditional sense. He's in a maximum security facility, serving what amounts to life without parole, with a death sentence that may never be carried out. Governor Newsom's moratorium can be reversed by a future governor, but all declared Democratic candidates for the 2026 gubernatorial race have stated they will maintain the moratorium, and California remains a strongly Democratic state. The practical reality is that Alejandro Avila will likely die in prison of natural causes. He'll spend the rest of his life incarcerated. But he probably won't be executed. How does Erin Runnion feel about this? She's spoken about it publicly. "I will never forgive what he did to my daughter," she says. But she adds that the only person whose forgiveness should matter is Samantha's, not hers. She talks about sitting in court, listening to testimony about Avila's childhood, about the abuse he suffered, about being tied up and beaten as a child, about the dysfunction in his family. It's no excuse for what he did at all, Erin says, but it is a fact that he was a victim of horrible crimes himself as a child. We need to prevent crimes against all children. This is Erin's approach. She recognizes the cycle of violence. She understands that people who abuse children were often abused themselves. That doesn't excuse their actions, but it does suggest a path forward: prevention. I tell his story for a lot of reasons, Aaron says. People tend to think about child abusers and child murderers as monsters. But we need to understand what creates these monsters. It's this cycle of violence. Her focus remains on prevention, on education, on breaking that cycle, on protecting children before they become victims. The Joyful Child Foundation continues its work throughout the 2010s and into the 2020s. The organization holds annual fundraising galas. It trains teachers and law enforcement officers. It provides free programs to schools and community organizations. In 2013, the foundation launches the Be Brave, Be Safe empowerment programs, specifically. These are refined, research-based curricula for different age groups. For young children, the focus is on body autonomy, teaching them that their body belongs to them, that they have the right to say no to unwanted touch, that they should tell a trusted adult if someone makes them uncomfortable. For older children, the programs teach about recognizing manipulation tactics, about understanding that predators often groom victims over time, about the difference between secrets and surprises. For teenagers, the programs address online safety, dating violence, and consent. The programs are designed to empower children without frightening them, to give them tools without creating paranoia. It's a delicate balance, and Erin and her team work carefully to get it right. When the COVID-19 pandemic hits in 2020, the foundation pivots to online and webinar-based classes. This actually expands their reach. Suddenly, they can train people across the country, even internationally, without the limitations of physical travel. On October 26, 2024, the foundation holds its annual Joyful Gala. It's a fundraiser, but it's also a celebration of the children who have been kept safe, of the progress that's been made. The foundation is now 22 years old. It has trained thousands of educators and law enforcement officers. Its programs have reached hundreds of thousands of children. This is Samantha's legacy. Every child who learns to trust their instincts. Every child who recognizes danger and gets away. Every child who tells a trusted adult about something that made them uncomfortable. Every potential tragedy that's prevented. That's Samantha's legacy. Make sure you're subscribed to Cold Case Desk and have notifications turned on. In our final part, we'll explore the memorials to Samantha, the ongoing impact of this case, and why it remains one of the most significant child safety cases in American history. Aaron Runnion also works on a memoir. It's titled Be Brave, Losing Samantha, Protecting Joy. The book will tell Samantha's story, but it will also serve as a guide for parents and advocates. As of December 2025, the book hasn't been published yet, but Aaron speaks frequently about the project. It's her way of ensuring Samantha's story continues to reach people, that the lessons learned continue to protect children. Aaron also hosts a podcast called Let's Talk Joy. It's focused on child protection, trauma recovery, and advocacy. She interviews other advocates, survivors, law enforcement officials, and experts in child development. She remains an in-demand speaker. Schools invite her. Universities invite her. Law enforcement conferences invite her. Community organizations invite her. Every time she speaks, she tells Samantha's story. She talks about what happened, about what could have prevented it, about what can prevent it from happening to other children. She's turned her grief into action, her pain into purpose, her loss into legacy, and she's connected with victim advocates around the world. She's part of a community of people who have suffered terrible losses and chosen to fight back, to work for change, to protect others. One particularly poignant connection is with the family of Megan Kanka. Megan was a 7-year-old girl in New Jersey who was raped and murdered by a neighbor in 1994. The neighbor was a twice-convicted sex offender, but Megan's parents didn't know that. Megan's death led to Megan's Law, requiring sex offender registration and community notification. The law spread to all 50 states and eventually became part of federal law. Aaron Runnion and Megan's parents have met and spoken. They share a terrible bond. Children whose deaths changed laws, children whose stories protect others. There's also Amber Hagerman, the 9-year-old whose 1996 abduction and murder in Texas led to the creation of the Amber Alert system. California adopted the Amber Alert because of Samantha. The system was created because of Amber. 2 girls, connected by tragedy, whose legacies save lives. Every time an Amber Alert goes out and a child is recovered safely, it's partly because of Amber Hagerman and partly because of Samantha Runnion. Their deaths led to a system that prevents other deaths. On the 10th anniversary of Samantha's death in July 2012, PBS produces a documentary segment for their Real Orange series. It's titled Journey Through a Decade of Pain, Bravery, and Hope. The segment features interviews with Aaron Runnion, law enforcement officials involved in the case, and people whose lives have been touched by the Joyful Child Foundation. It examines what's changed in the 10 years since Samantha's death: the Amber Alert system, the DNA laws, the education programs, the increased awareness, but it also acknowledges the ongoing challenges. Child sexual abuse remains tragically common. Predators continue to hurt children. The work is far from finished. On the 20th anniversary in July 2022, Fox 11 Los Angeles conducts an exclusive interview with Aaron Runnion. Journalist Laura Diaz accompanies Aaron as she drives to the location where Samantha's body was found. The road is now called South Main Divide. It was renamed from Killen Truck Trail in March 2003, partly to distance it from the tragedy. Aaron stands at the spot where hang gliders found her daughter 20 years earlier. She talks about what that day was like, about the moment she learned Samantha had been found, about the years since then. "I like to think that it wasn't for nothing," Aaron says. "That a lot of children have been protected because of her." The interview is emotional. 20 years later, the pain is still visible. But so is the purpose, the determination, the refusal to let Samantha's death be meaningless. Throughout all of this, one question lingers. Could Samantha's death have been prevented? The answer is yes, in multiple ways. If the jury in 2001 had convicted Alejandro Avila, he would have been in prison on July 15, 2002. Samantha would have lived. If Catherine and Alexis had been believed, if the system had protected them, Samantha would have lived. If California had already implemented the Amber Alert system, if drivers on those freeways had known to look for a green Thunderbird with a 5-year-old girl inside, maybe someone would have called it in. Maybe Samantha would have been rescued. If the location where Samantha and Sarah were playing hadn't been such a blind spot, if an adult had been watching, if Samantha's grandmother had been outside instead of inside, if the complex had better security, if. But all the ifs in the world don't change what happened. Samantha was abducted. Samantha was murdered. And the only person responsible is Alejandro Avila. The system failed. The jury in 2001 failed. But ultimately, one person made the choice to hurt children. One person chose to abduct and kill a 5-year-old girl. That person is now 50 years old, sitting in a California prison, likely to remain there until he dies of natural causes. His death sentence hangs over him, but it probably will never be carried out. He has never admitted guilt, never expressed remorse, never apologized to Samantha's family or to the families of the other girls he hurt. In prison records, he's listed as condemned inmate Alejandro Avila. Received date, July 25, 2005. Status: active condemned inmate. That's all he is now. A number, a file, a person waiting to die. Meanwhile, Samantha's memory lives on. In the Joyful Child Foundation, in California's Amber Alert system, in Katie's Law, in the Adam Walsh Act, in the hundreds of children who have been saved because of programs and systems that exist because of her. 23 years have passed since Samantha Runnion was murdered. Nearly a quarter century. An entire generation of children has grown up in a world shaped, in small but significant ways, by what happened to her. Most of these children don't know Samantha's name, they don't know her story, but they've benefited from the changes her death catalyzed. When an Amber Alert flashes on freeway signs across California, most drivers don't think about why that system exists. They don't know it was Samantha Runnion's case that convinced Governor Gray Davis to finally implement it in California. When children in classrooms across America participate in safety education programs that teach them about body autonomy and trusting their instincts, most don't know. Those programs were pioneered by a mother whose 5-year-old daughter was abducted and murdered. When DNA collected at arrest rather than after conviction solves a cold case, most people don't connect it to the advocacy work done by Aaron Runnion and Jan Sepich and other mothers who lost children. But these connections exist, and they matter. Let's examine specifically what changed because of Samantha's case, and what those changes mean for child safety today. First, the California Amber Alert system. As we discussed earlier, Governor Davis signed Assembly Bill No. 415 into law on August 24, 2002. California became the 14th state to adopt the Amber Alert system, but the implementation in California was particularly aggressive. The state invested heavily in the technology infrastructure needed to display alerts on electronic freeway signs across the vast California highway system. California has more than 50,000 lane miles of highways. The state has approximately 39 million residents. Greater Los Angeles alone has more people than most states. Making an Amber Alert system work in California required coordination between the California Highway Patrol, local law enforcement agencies across 58 counties, the Department of Transportation, television and radio broadcasters, and eventually cellular phone providers. It was a massive undertaking. And Samantha Runnion's case provided the political will and public support to make it happen quickly. The California Amber Alert system has specific criteria for activation. The abducted person must be under 18 years old. Law enforcement must believe the abduction poses a credible threat of serious bodily harm or death. There must be enough descriptive information about the victim, abductor, or vehicle to believe the alert will help. These criteria are designed to prevent overuse of the system, which could lead to alert fatigue where the public stops paying attention. As of December 2025, California has activated the Amber Alert system hundreds of times. The success rate is remarkable. In a significant majority of cases, the child is recovered safely. Sometimes the recovery is direct. A driver sees the alert, spots the vehicle, calls police. Law enforcement intercepts the abductor and rescues the child. Sometimes the recovery is indirect. The abductor sees the alert on a freeway sign or hears it on the radio and realizes they're being hunted. They abandon the child somewhere safe and flee. The child is found unharmed. And sometimes the alert doesn't directly lead to recovery, but it generates tips that help investigators. Witnesses who saw the abductor come forward. Surveillance footage is found. The net closes. The Amber Alert system isn't perfect. Sometimes it's activated, and the child is already deceased. Sometimes the alert goes out, but the child is never found. Sometimes the information is inaccurate, and the wrong person is stopped or harassed. But overall, the system works. It saves lives. And California's system, implemented because of Samantha Runnion, is one of the most effective in the nation. Other states watched California's implementation closely. The success stories from California encouraged other states to invest more heavily in their own Amber Alert infrastructure. The system also went digital. Initially, Amber Alerts were displayed on freeway signs and broadcast on radio and television. But as cell phones became ubiquitous, the system expanded. Now, when an Amber Alert is issued, it can be pushed directly to millions of cell phones in a specific geographic area. You're driving in Southern California, and suddenly, your phone buzzes with an alert. A child has been abducted. This is what the child looks like. This is what the vehicle looks like. Call 911 if you see anything. This level of mass notification was impossible in 2002, but it's routine now, and it's incredibly effective. Samantha Runnion's legacy includes every child recovered because of an Amber Alert in California and beyond. That's hundreds of children, hundreds of families who didn't have to experience what Aaron Runnion experienced. Second, the Joyful Child Foundation and the Be Brave programs. This is where Samantha's legacy becomes most direct and personal. The foundation Aaron created has become a significant force in child protection education. But what makes it effective? What separates it from other well-meaning but less impactful programs? The answer is research-based curriculum design and a focus on empowerment rather than fear. Many child safety programs fail because they terrify children. They teach kids that danger is everywhere, that adults can't be trusted, that the world is full of people who want to hurt them. These programs often do more harm than good. They create anxious, fearful children who don't trust their own judgment or the adults in their lives. The Be Brave programs take a different approach. They teach children specific skills without creating generalized fear. For young children, ages 4 through 7, the focus is on body autonomy. The curriculum teaches children that their body belongs to them, that they have the right to say no to unwanted touch, even from family members and friends, that some touches are okay, like a hug from a parent, and some are not. Critically, the program teaches children the difference between good secrets and bad secrets. A birthday surprise for mom is a good secret. An adult asking you to keep a secret about touching is a bad secret. The program uses age-appropriate language and activities, stories, role-playing, songs. The children learn without realizing they're learning, and they learn without being frightened. For children ages 8 through 11, the curriculum becomes more sophisticated. It teaches about manipulation tactics, about how predators often groom victims over time, about recognizing when an adult or older teenager is behaving inappropriately. The program teaches children to trust their instincts. If something feels wrong, it probably is wrong. It's okay to say no. It's okay to tell an adult. It's okay to make a scene if necessary. One of the most powerful elements of the curriculum is teaching children that it's never their fault if an adult hurts them. Many victims of abuse blame themselves. They think they did something wrong. They think they should have known better or fought harder. The Be Brave programs address this directly. If an adult hurts a child, that's the adult's fault, period. The child is never responsible. This message is repeated throughout the curriculum. For teenagers, ages 12 through 18, the curriculum expands to cover online safety, dating violence, and consent. It teaches teenagers about the tactics used in online grooming, about recognizing red flags in relationships, about the importance of enthusiastic consent. The programs also train adults. Parents learn how to talk to their children about safety without terrifying them. Teachers learn how to recognize signs of abuse. Law enforcement officers learn about trauma-informed approaches to interviewing child victims. The Joyful Child Foundation doesn't just drop curriculum into schools and walk away. They provide ongoing support, training, materials, follow-up. As of December 2025, the foundation has trained thousands of educators and law enforcement officers. The Be Brave programs have been implemented in schools across California and in multiple other states. How many children have been protected because of these programs? That's impossible to quantify precisely. If a child recognizes a dangerous situation and gets away, that often goes unreported. If a child tells a trusted adult about inappropriate behavior and that adult intervenes before abuse occurs, there's no crime to prosecute. But based on the number of children who have participated in the programs, it's reasonable to estimate that thousands of children have been protected. Potential abuse has been prevented. Potential abductions have been avoided. Lives have been saved. This is Samantha's legacy working in real time. Third, legislative changes. Erin Runnion has been involved in advocating for and supporting numerous pieces of child protection legislation at both state and federal levels. We've already discussed the Adam Walsh Child Protection and Safety Act of 2006, which specifically names Samantha in its findings. That act created a national sex offender registry, strengthened registration requirements, and increased penalties for crimes against children. We've discussed Katie's Law, requiring DNA collection from individuals arrested for serious felonies. Erin was a key supporter of this legislation as it spread from New Mexico to other states. But there are other laws too. California has passed numerous bills strengthening protections for children since 2002. Many of them have had Erin Runnion testifying in support. Laws regarding mandatory reporting of suspected child abuse. Laws regarding background checks for people who work with children. Laws regarding statute of limitations for prosecution of child sexual abuse cases. Each of these laws makes children slightly safer. Each removes a small vulnerability in the system. None of them alone would have saved Samantha. But collectively, they create a stronger safety net. Erin has also worked on laws regarding victims' rights, ensuring that victims and their families have a voice in criminal proceedings, that they're notified about parole hearings, that they can make impact statements. These laws don't prevent crimes, but they ensure that when crimes occur, victims are treated with dignity and respect. Fourth, cultural change. This is harder to measure but perhaps most important. Before Samantha's case, many people didn't fully understand the reality of stranger abductions. There was a sense that this was something that happened elsewhere, that it couldn't happen in a safe, middle-class community like Stanton. Samantha's case shattered that illusion. It happened in broad daylight, in a nice neighborhood, to a child whose parents were careful and protective. The message was clear. This can happen anywhere, to anyone. No community is immune. That realization led to changes in how parents supervise children, how communities are designed, how schools think about security. In 2002, it was common for young children to play outside unsupervised. Today, that's much less common. Some sociologists argue this is because of declining community trust, increased fear, and a handful of high-profile cases like Samantha's. Whether this change is good or bad is debatable. Some argue that children today are overprotected, that they're not developing independence and resilience. Others argue that increased supervision is necessary given the real dangers that exist. But regardless of whether the change is positive or negative, it's undeniable that Samantha's case contributed to that shift. The case also changed how law enforcement handles child abduction cases. The immediate, massive response to Samantha's disappearance, with FBI agents flooding into Orange County within hours, became a template. Today, when a child is abducted, the response is immediate and overwhelming. Multiple agencies coordinate instantly. The investigation runs 24 hours a day. Every available resource is deployed. This wasn't always the case. In earlier decades, there was sometimes a waiting period before police would take a missing child report seriously. The assumption was the child was a runaway or would return on their own. High-profile cases like Samantha's, along with others like Elizabeth Smart and J.C. Dugard, changed that approach. Now, every missing child case is treated as potentially serious from the first moment. There's also been a cultural shift in how we think about testimony from child witnesses. The 2001 jury that acquitted Alejandro Avila didn't believe Catherine and Alexis. They saw inconsistencies in the children's statements and concluded the children weren't credible. Today, there's more understanding about how trauma affects memory, about why a child who has been abused might give inconsistent details about timing or frequency while being consistent about the core events. Law enforcement officers and prosecutors now receive specialized training on interviewing child witnesses. Techniques have been developed to help children provide accurate information without leading questions or undue pressure. Forensic interview centers have been established, where trained specialists interview child victims in child-friendly settings, with the interviews recorded so the child doesn't have to testify multiple times. These changes mean that cases like Avila's 2001 trial, where he was acquitted despite credible accusations from 2 children, are less likely to result in acquittals today. That's a direct result of cases like Samantha's, showing what can happen when the system fails to protect children. Now let's talk about what Samantha's case teaches us about prevention, justice, and how we think about criminal behavior. Prevention is always better than punishment. Alejandro Avila's conviction and death sentence provides justice for Samantha and her family. But it doesn't bring Samantha back. It doesn't undo the trauma inflicted on Catherine, Alexis, and Kara. Real success is preventing crimes before they occur. That's what the Joyful Child Foundation's programs aim to do. That's what Better Sex Offender Management aims to do. That's what early intervention in dysfunctional families aims to do. Avila was abused as a child. He grew up in violence and dysfunction. These facts don't excuse what he did. As Dr. Park Dietz testified, pedophiles have free will. They can choose not to act on their urges. But if Avila had received effective intervention as a child, if his abuse had been stopped and he had received proper treatment, maybe he never would have become someone who hurts children. This is the cycle Aaron Runnion talks about. Hurt people hurt people. Abused children sometimes become abusers. Breaking that cycle requires early intervention. It requires properly funding child protective services. It requires accessible mental health treatment. It requires addressing poverty, substance abuse, domestic violence, all the factors that create environments where child abuse occurs. These are complex, systemic issues. They don't have simple solutions, but they're essential if we want to prevent tragedies like Samantha's. Another lesson from this case involves the criminal justice system's treatment of child sexual abuse cases. The 2001 acquittal was a catastrophic failure. 2 children testified about abuse. A third came forward later. All 3 gave consistent accounts of Avila's behavior. But because there was no physical evidence, no DNA, just the children's testimony, the jury acquitted. This highlights a fundamental problem. We ask juries to determine whether children are telling the truth about abuse. But we don't always give jurors the tools to make that determination accurately. Children who are being abused often can't provide the kind of precise, consistent testimony we expect from adult witnesses. They're traumatized. They're frightened. They may not understand what's happening to them. They may have been threatened. Yet we expect them to testify like adults, to remember exact dates and times, to provide consistent details across multiple interviews, to withstand aggressive cross-examination. And when they can't meet these expectations, we sometimes conclude they're not credible. The jury thinks, if this really happened, the child would remember better. But that's not how memory works, especially for traumatized children. Research in psychology and neuroscience has shown that trauma affects how memories are encoded and retrieved. The criminal justice system has started to incorporate this research. Expert witnesses now testify about child development and trauma-related memory issues. Judges instruct juries about these factors. But more needs to be done. Jurors need better education. Prosecutors need better training on how to present child testimony cases. Defense attorneys need to stop using discredited tactics that involve aggressively attacking child witnesses. The case also raises questions about what we do with people like Alejandro Avila. He's been sentenced to death, but he's probably never going to be executed. He's going to spend the rest of his life in prison at significant taxpayer expense. Some people argue this is justice. He gets to live the rest of his life in a cell, thinking about what he did, never experiencing freedom again. That's punishment. Others argue it's not enough. He killed a 5-year-old child. He deserves to die. The fact that California won't carry out his execution is a failure of justice. Still others argue the death penalty itself is wrong, regardless of the crime. That the state shouldn't be in the business of killing people. That life in prison is sufficient. These are fundamental questions about justice, punishment, and what we as a society believe is right. Samantha's case doesn't answer these questions, but it forces us to grapple with them. What does Samantha's family believe? Erin has been somewhat circumspect on this issue. She supported the death penalty at trial. She wanted Avila to receive the harshest possible sentence. But she's also said that her focus is on preventing future crimes, not on whether Avila lives or dies. She's channeled her energy into protecting other children rather than dwelling on Avila's fate. Derek, Samantha's father, has been less visible in public advocacy. His grief has been more private. But in interviews conducted shortly after the trial, he expressed support for the death penalty in this case. Now, let's address a difficult question. Is Samantha's story being exploited? True crime content, including this documentary, tells the stories of real victims. Real people who suffered and died. Real families who are grieving. There's always a tension between honoring victims by telling their stories and exploiting those victims for entertainment or profit. Erin Runnion has been intentional about how Samantha's story is told. She's participated in documentaries and news specials, but she's always used those platforms to educate and advocate, not just to relive the tragedy. She's written about her belief that Samantha's story needs to be told, not for sensationalism, but because it can protect other children, because it can teach parents to be vigilant, because it can show how quickly tragedy can strike. This documentary aims to honor that approach. We've focused on the investigation, the evidence, the legal proceedings, and the legacy. We've tried to present Samantha as a real child, not just a victim, a 5-year-old girl who loved superheroes and sunflowers, who was excited about her 6th birthday, who played with her best friend in a courtyard. We've also tried to examine the systems that failed to protect her and the changes that have been made since. If this documentary makes you more aware of dangers children face, if it makes you more vigilant about protecting children in your life, if it makes you support organizations like the Joyful Child Foundation, then telling Samantha's story has value. What can individuals do to help protect children? Here are some concrete actions. Learn the warning signs of child abuse. Physical signs like unexplained bruises or injuries. Behavioral signs like sudden changes in behavior, regression to younger behaviors, inappropriate sexual knowledge, fear of specific people or places. If you suspect a child is being abused, report it. In the United States, you can call the Child Help National Child Abuse Hotline at 1-800-4A-CHILD. That's 1-800-422-44533. The hotline is available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Calls are confidential. Many states have mandatory reporting laws. If you're a teacher, doctor, counselor, or work with children in other capacities, you're legally required to report suspected abuse. But even if you're not a mandatory reporter, you can and should report concerns. Support organizations that work to protect children. The Joyful Child Foundation is one. There are many others. National organizations like the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. Local organizations providing services to abused children. These organizations need funding, volunteers, and advocates. If you can donate money, great. If you can't, you can donate time or help spread awareness about their work. Talk to the children in your life about safety. Use age-appropriate language. Don't terrify them, but teach them that their body belongs to them, that they have the right to say no to unwanted touch, that they should tell a trusted adult if someone makes them uncomfortable. Teach them the difference between good secrets and bad secrets. Teach them that it's never their fault if an adult does something wrong. Be an alert adult. When you're at a park, at a school, in a public place, pay attention to what's happening around you. If you see something that seems wrong, a child who appears to be in distress, an adult behaving inappropriately toward a child, trust your instincts. Intervene if appropriate. Call authorities if necessary. The bystander effect is real. People often assume someone else will help. Be the person who helps. Support evidence-based policies that protect children. DNA collection at arrest. Fully funded child protective services. Access to mental health treatment. Programs addressing poverty and family dysfunction. These aren't glamorous issues. They don't generate headlines. But they prevent abuse before it occurs. That's the most important work. As we conclude this documentary, let's return to where we started. A 6-year-old girl pointing in a courtroom, Sarah Ahn, who witnessed her best friend being abducted, Who provided the description that led police to Alejandro Avila, who testified at trial despite her trauma and fear? Sarah's courage is part of Samantha's story. Without her testimony, without her willingness to relive that terrible day, Avila might not have been convicted. Justice for Samantha depended on a 6-year-old child being brave. Sarah is an adult now. She's lived more than 20 years with the memory of what happened to her best friend. We can only hope she's found peace and healing. And Samantha, a 5-year-old girl who loved Disney movies and superheroes, who was kind and loving and everything a child should be, as her mother said, who had her whole life ahead of her, who was 11 days from her 6th birthday when she was taken. Her death was a tragedy that never should have happened. It was preventable in multiple ways. The system failed her. But her legacy is real and powerful. The Amber Alert system in California, the Be Brave programs teaching children to protect themselves, the legislative changes strengthening child protection, the cultural shift in how we think about child safety. Hundreds of children have been saved because of changes that exist because of Samantha. That's not nothing. That doesn't make her death acceptable or worthwhile. But it means her life mattered. Her story continues to protect others. Erin Runnion will carry the pain of losing her daughter for the rest. Erin Runnion will carry the pain of losing her daughter for the rest of her life. That pain doesn't diminish with time. It doesn't fade. You don't get over the murder of your child. But Erin has transformed that pain into purpose. She's chosen to honor Samantha not by retreating from the world, but by working tirelessly to protect other children. I like to think that it wasn't for nothing, Erin says, that a lot of children have been protected because of her. That's the legacy of Samantha Bree Runnion. Not just a victim, not just a tragedy, but a catalyst for change that continues to save lives more than 2 decades after her death. Alejandro Avila sits in a California prison cell. He's 50 years old now. He's been incarcerated for more than 23 years. If he lives to average life expectancy, he has perhaps another 25 to 30 years left. Those years will be spent in a cell, in isolation from society, without freedom, without joy, without the ability to hurt anyone else. He has never admitted what he did, never expressed remorse, never apologized. He maintains his innocence despite DNA evidence that proves beyond any doubt that Samantha was in his car, that he touched her, that she fought back against him. His denial changes nothing. The evidence is irrefutable. The conviction is final. Justice, in the legal sense, has been served. But for Samantha's family, there's no real closure. Derek still thinks about his daughter every day. He wakes up thinking about her, goes to bed thinking about her. The pain is constant. Erin has channeled her grief into action, but that doesn't mean the grief is gone. She's simply found a way to live with it, to make meaning from meaninglessness, to turn tragedy into purpose. The Joyful Child Foundation is more than just an organization. It's Erin's way of keeping Samantha present in the world. Every child who participates in a Be Brave program is connected to Samantha. Every teacher trained, every law enforcement officer educated, every parent who learns to talk to their children about safety, they're all part of Samantha's legacy. Erin has spoken at hundreds of events over the past 23 years. She's testified before legislative committees more times than she can count. She's trained thousands of people. She's reached hundreds of thousands of children through the Foundation's programs. She's traveled to Sacramento repeatedly to advocate for child protection laws. She's been to Washington, D.C. multiple times, meeting with lawmakers, pushing for federal legislation. She stood in the White House when President Bush signed the Adam Walsh Act, seeing Samantha's name included in federal law. She's connected with victim advocates across the country and around the world. She's shared platforms with John Walsh, Mark Klaas, Ed Smart, and others who have lost children and chosen to fight back. This work is exhausting. It requires reliving the worst moment of her life over and over. Every time she tells Samantha's story, she has to go back to July 15th, 2002, back to that phone call, back to that terrible moment when Hope died. But she does it because it matters, because each time she tells the story, she might reach someone, might teach a child how to recognize danger, might convince a parent to have that difficult conversation, might inspire a legislator to support stronger protections. 23 years of this work, 23 years of advocacy, 23 years of turning grief into action. That takes extraordinary strength and resilience. The Foundation continues to evolve. In recent years, online safety has become a major focus. When Samantha was murdered in 2002, social media barely existed. MySpace was still a year away from launching. Facebook wouldn't exist for another 2 years. Instagram and Snapchat were more than a decade in the future. Today's children face dangers that didn't exist in 2002. Online predators, cyberbullying, sextortion, human trafficking networks that use social media to identify and groom victims. The Be Brave programs have expanded to address these threats, teaching children about privacy settings, about not sharing personal information online, about recognizing when someone is trying to manipulate them through social media, teaching teenagers about the permanence of digital content, that a photo sent in confidence can be shared widely, that what seems like a private conversation might not be private at all. The foundation also addresses issues around consent and healthy relationships in the digital age. How do you navigate intimacy when everything can be recorded and shared? How do you establish boundaries when you're constantly connected? These are complex issues. The foundation doesn't claim to have all the answers, but they're developing evidence-based curricula to help young people navigate these challenges safely. The COVID-19 pandemic forced another evolution. When schools closed in March 2020, in-person training stopped. The foundation quickly pivoted to online delivery. They developed webinar versions of their programs. They created video resources that teachers and parents could use at home. They expanded their reach beyond California, training people across the country and internationally. This turned out to be a silver lining. The online format allowed them to reach people they never could have reached through in-person training alone. A teacher in rural Montana can now access the same training as a teacher in Los Angeles. The Foundation's annual Joyful Gala has become a significant event in Orange County. It's a fundraiser, bringing together donors, advocates, survivors, and law enforcement. But it's also a celebration, a recognition of progress made, an honoring of the children who have been protected. At the October 2024 gala, Erin spoke about the Foundation's impact over 22 years. She shared stories of children who had used skills learned in Be Brave programs to escape dangerous situations. She talked about parents who had recognized warning signs of abuse because of Foundation training. She also talked about Samantha, about the little girl who loved Hercules and sunflowers, who would be 28 years old if she had lived, who might have children of her own by now, who might have pursued any number of dreams and goals. That's the tragedy. Not just what happened, but everything that will never happen. All the birthdays that will never be celebrated, all the milestones that will never be reached, the entire life that was stolen. But in talking about what Samantha's life might have been, Erin also talks about what it became, how Samantha's story has protected others, how her death led to changes that have saved lives. Samantha had a gift for the world, Erin has said repeatedly. We always knew that. We just never imagined her greatness would be realized in her death. It's a heartbreaking statement. No parent wants their child's greatness to be realized through their murder. But Erin has found a way to make meaning from the tragedy, to ensure that Samantha's short life continues to matter. In 2022, on the 20th anniversary of Samantha's death, journalist Laura Diaz asked Erin what she wanted people to know about Samantha. I want people to know she was real, Erin said. She wasn't just a news story or a case file. She was a real little girl. She was funny and smart and kind. She loved to surprise me when I came home from work. She would hide and jump out. She kept a poster of Hercules above her bed because he was her hero. I want people to know that she mattered, that her life had value, that she was loved deeply. And I want people to know that you can turn grief into action. You can take the worst thing that ever happened and use it to help others. That doesn't make it okay. Nothing makes it okay. But it means she didn't die for nothing. Her story is saving other children. That has to mean something. This philosophy that tragedy can be transformed into purpose is at the heart of victim advocacy work. It's what allows people like Erin Runnion and John Walsh and Mark Claus to continue fighting decades after their children were killed. They can't bring their children back, but they can prevent other families from experiencing the same loss. They can turn their pain into protection for others. This is Samantha's true legacy. Not the details of her murder, not the trial of her killer, not the DNA evidence or the legal proceedings. Those things matter for justice. But the legacy is the lives saved, the children protected, the changes made. As of December 2025, California's Amber Alert system has been activated hundreds of times. The vast majority of those activations result in the safe recovery of the abducted child. That's hundreds of families who didn't lose their children. Hundreds of children who lived because the system existed. The Joyful Child Foundation has trained thousands of educators and law enforcement officers. The Be Brave programs have reached hundreds of thousands of children. How many of those children have been protected? How many potential abuses have been prevented? How many dangerous situations have been recognized and avoided? We can't know exact numbers. Prevention is invisible. When something doesn't happen, we don't always know why. But based on research into child safety education programs, it's reasonable to estimate that thousands of children have been protected, potential victims who never became victims, tragedies that never occurred. Katie's Law, which Aaron helped advocate for, has led to the solving of thousands of cold cases nationwide. DNA collected at arrest has identified rapists and murderers who might never have been caught under the old system, where DNA was only collected after conviction. The Adam Walsh Act, which names Samantha, created a comprehensive national sex offender registry. It strengthened tracking of convicted sex offenders. It increased penalties for crimes against children. It's had measurable impact on child protection nationwide. These are Samantha's legacies, real, concrete, measurable changes that have made children safer. But beyond the specific programs and laws, there's a broader cultural impact. Samantha's case, along with other high-profile cases, changed how America thinks about child safety. Parents are more vigilant. Communities are more aware. Law enforcement responds more quickly. The systems designed to protect children are stronger than they were in 2002. Not strong enough. Children are still abused. Children are still abducted. Children are still murdered. The work is far from finished. But we're further along than we were. And that progress is due, in part, to Samantha Runnion and the advocacy work her mother has done in her name. If you're watching this documentary, you're now part of Samantha's story. You know what happened to her. You know about the system failures that made her death possible. You know about the changes that have been made since. What you do with that knowledge matters. If you have children in your life, talk to them about safety. If you see something concerning, speak up. If you can support organizations protecting children, do so. If you have the ability to advocate for stronger child protection policies, use your voice. Samantha's story doesn't have to end with tragedy. It can continue through action, through awareness, through each person who decides to make children's safety a priority. Before we close, let's return one final time to that courtyard at the Smoke Tree condominium complex in Stanton, California. The location has changed in the 23 years since Samantha's death. New families have moved in. Children who weren't born in 2002 now play in that same courtyard. The memorial that stood there for years is gone now. The flowers and teddy bears and candles have long since been removed. Life continues. The complex is home to families who may not even know what happened there in July 2002. But the memory persists. Longtime residents remember. They remember the little girl who used to play there. They remember the day she was taken. They remember the community coming together in grief and fear and determination to make sure it never happened again. Across Southern California, freeway signs still flash amber alerts when children are abducted. Drivers see those alerts and know to look for the described vehicle, to call 911 if they spot it, to be the eyes and ears that might save a child's life. In classrooms across California and beyond, children participate in Be Brave programs. They learn about body autonomy, about trusting their instincts, about recognizing danger, about getting help, skills that might one day save their lives. In Sacramento and Washington, D.C., legislators continue to work on child protection laws. Some of them remember Samantha's case. Some of them have met Aaron Runnion. They know the stakes. They know that their work literally saves lives. And in Orange County, the Joyful Child Foundation continues its work. Training, educating, advocating, protecting. All of this exists because of a 5-year-old girl who loved superheroes and sunflowers, who was brave even in her final moments, who fought back against someone much bigger and stronger, who left behind a legacy far greater than anyone could have imagined. Samantha Bree Runnion. Born July 26, 1996, in Boston, Massachusetts. Died July 16, 2002, near Lake Elsinore, California. 5 years old, 11 days from her 6th birthday. Daughter, friend, child, catalyst, legacy. Her story is tragic, but it's also powerful. It's a reminder that even in the darkest moments, even in the face of unimaginable loss, we can choose to act, we can choose to protect others, we can choose to make meaning from meaninglessness. Aaron Runnion chose that path. And because of that choice, Samantha's story continues. Not just as a victim of violence, but as a force for change, a reminder of what matters, a call to action. If you found this documentary valuable, please like, comment, and subscribe to Cold Case Desk. Consider sharing it with others who might benefit from knowing Samantha's story. And most importantly, consider supporting the Joyful Child Foundation at their website. Your support helps them continue their work protecting children in Samantha's name. To Samantha Runnion, your life mattered. Your story continues to save others. You are remembered, you are honored, and you are loved. To Aaron Runnion, thank you for your strength, your courage, and your unwavering dedication to protecting children. Thank you for turning grief into action. Thank you for ensuring Samantha's legacy lives on. And to every child who has been protected because of changes made after Samantha's death, you are her legacy. You are why her story must be told. You are the reason her mother fights. You are the proof that even tragedy can lead to hope. This has been Cold Case Desk. Thank you for watching.